Qualichem, supporting the water treatment community since 1990. The blender matters. Your blender is the key relationship that leads to the success of your water treatment company. Qualichem provides technical support, sales support, formulation support, training, and so much more. To find out more about Qualichem, go to scalinguph2o.com/Qualichem. Once again, that's scalinguph2o.com/Qualichem. At Qualichem, we know the blender matters. Hey there, Scaling Up Nation. Trace Blackmore here, and I've got something that'll revolutionize your approach to risk management. McGowan Insurance Group. They're not just another insurance broker. They're your strategic partners in safeguarding your water treatment business. Imagine this, a team of experts who truly get our industry, offering a full spectrum of services from property and casualty to employee benefits and even 401k administration. They're licensed in all 50 states, so wherever you're treating water, they've got your back. But here's the real kicker. McGowan doesn't just sell policies, they forge exceptional client experiences. They'll deep dive into your operations, craft a customized risk analysis, and even evaluate your risk management program. So, Scaling Up Nation, if you're ready to take your risk management to new heights, reach out to the industrial water treatment team at McGowan. Head over to scalinguph2o.com/McGowan to find out more. Once again, that's scalinguph2o.com/McGowan. McGowan Insurance Group. Start forging your path to better protection today. Welcome to the Scaling Up H2O podcast, the podcast where we scale up on knowledge so we don't scale up our systems. I'm Trace Blackmore, the host of the Scaling Up H2O podcast. And Nation, this past Tuesday, we celebrated Earth Day. And this was the 55th anniversary of this planet celebrating Earth Day. And let's face it, we are industrial water treaters. We celebrate Earth Day each and every day. It is built in the job description of what we do for our customers each and every day. We are making sure that they are spending less money on water. We are making sure that they are using the least amount of water possible, thereby allowing more water to be used in other places. We are making sure that they are not paying a dime extra for energy because we are keeping our systems efficient. And because of that, there is no more energy going to our customer locations because of that efficiency. So we are using less resources to create that energy and also allowing energy to go to other places. I would argue that the industrial water treatment industry is Earth Day every single day. And as I've said on many episodes, no matter how you define being green, whether it's saving your customers green on all of their costs, or whether it's saving all of the natural resources that we have on this planet, we have your definition in this industry. That's the industrial water treatment industry. So happy Earth Day, everybody. And I also want to reach out to every water treater and remind them, we know these things, but our customers, they might know them, but they might not remember them. They might not remember what you told them, all the great things are that you're doing for them that allows them to focus on other things. So don't feel like you are tooting your own horn. That's okay to do every now and then. We need to make sure the people that are enlisting our services know the value that they're getting from our services, because if we're not telling them, somebody else might tell them about another type of service, and we might be doing the same thing. We might even be doing it better. We're just not telling them about it. So don't be embarrassed to talk to your customers and let them know the value that you bring every single time that you step into their mechanical room. Somebody that definitely understands the value of industrial water treatment is our friend James McDonald. And here is a brand new installment of What Are You Know by James.
Hello and welcome to What Are You Know? The game show where we find out what do you know about industrial water treatment, drop by drop. So pump up your brain, take out that test kit of knowledge, and prepare to answer this week's question on What Do You Know? Today's question is, what is the phenomenon called where calcium and magnesium are less soluble as the temperature rises? It is called retrograde solubility. The last place we want insulating scale to form is on the heat exchange surface, but due to calcium and magnesium's retrograde solubility, this is often the first place they form scale. But hey, it keeps life interesting, right? I'm James McDonald, and thanks for playing along with us. Stay tuned for next week's episode of What Do You Know?
Well, thank you, James, and thank you, Scaling Up Nation. We've received a lot of compliments about the promos that we have been doing in conjunction with James McDonald on this game show that he's created for the Scaling Up H2O podcast. And people seem to be really enjoying that. And of course, we post that on LinkedIn. So if you're not connected with us on LinkedIn, go over to Scaling Up, or you can connect with me, Trace Blackmore. Either way, we'll make sure that you are getting those social media posts, or at least make it easier for your feed to find. And if you ever need more information, you can always go to the Scaling Up H2O podcast. And we have so much information there. And you can always catch up on what James has done in the past, so you can stay informed each and every week, even if you've missed a week here and there. Speaking of this week, several of you might be going to the Water Quality Association Convention and Expo. That's taking place this week in Long Beach, California. So while you're there, make sure you tell a couple people about this podcast. This is the podcast for industrial water treatment. And every time we find a new Scaling Up Nation member, we get a little bit stronger. We get some more feedback from some more people, and we are able to raise the bar in the industrial water treatment industry. So that's what you sharing this podcast helps us do. By the way, so many people tune into this podcast to learn about things that they can go to, just like the WQA Convention and Expo. So here are a few things you may want to mark your calendar with. The 2025 ASHI Annual Conference is taking place in Columbus, Ohio, July 27th through 30th. And of course, this is the American Society for Healthcare Engineering. So if you have hospitals, you are probably familiar with this organization. And we're going to have all of the information about this conference on our events page. Another conference you might want to make note of is the 2025 Industrial Water Conference that is taking place in Columbus, Ohio, June 23rd through 25th. And this is presented in partnership with the Water Environment Federation and the Water Reuse Association. So we're going to have more information on this by going to scalinguph2o.com and going over to our events section. You will also see the 2025 ISRI User Conference being held in San Diego, California, July 14th through 18th. And this is a leading event for GIS professionals offering insights integrating GIS technology into water utility operations. And finally, the 2025 Arizona Water Reuse Symposium is taking place July 20th through 22nd at the High Country Conference Center in Flagstaff, Arizona. The 2025 Arizona Water Reuse Symposium will be co hosting this event with the Arizona Water Association and the Water Reuse Arizona Association. So, we're going to have all of this information on everything that I just mentioned and so much more. We have every event we can find on our events page. So, while you're there, while you're at scalinguph2o.com/events, let us know if there's something that you know about that is not on that page, and we will be sure to get it up there. I know it is hard driving around from account to account and taking care of all your customers. It is difficult when you don't have time to scour the internet for what conference is coming up and which one is going to be near you. So that's why we tried to make that as user-friendly and easy as possible. And that's simply by going to scalinguph2o.com/events. Scaling Up Nation, I know you are going to enjoy this next interview, and here it is. My lab partner today is three-time returning guest, one of my mentors, Aaron Walker. Big A, welcome back again to the Scaling Up H2O podcast.
Man, you're a glutton for punishment, Trace. It's like 3 times here we go. So, yeah, man, what a delight it is always to be with you, especially getting a three-peat. So, yeah, I'm fired up to be with you.
Well, you are always an amazing guest, and you're no stranger to podcasts. How many podcasts would you say you've been on?
You know, we kept up with it for a long time, for years. I've been doing podcasts now about 11 years. And of course, we host a show also, but combined, it's over 3,000 podcasts, me being the guest as well as me doing the interviews. So somewhere north of 3,000 interviews.
Well, 3 of those are with the Scaling Up H2O podcast. And we originally had you on episode 184. And that's where you were just telling us about how we met and all the things that you do. And that was a fantastic episode. So, Nation, if you haven't checked 184 out, I would encourage you to do that. And then you came back with episode 248, and you decided that you were just going to check life out and see how you were doing it and what you could do better. And you took a sabbatical, and 248 was all about that. And I want to tell you, Big A, I received a lot of feedback where you encouraged a lot of people with that episode.
Yeah, that's good, man. Hey, we all need a little rest, right? And reevaluate. And I did. I took a 2-month sabbatical, and I came back a different person. And it was time well spent.
Well, Big A, you wrote a book. You wrote a book several years ago, and we have never talked about it here on the podcast. And I recently reread it, and we were telling right before we hit the record button that I enjoyed it the first time, but I seem to get so much more out of it. I don't know, it's probably the mindset that I was in, but I just really enjoyed reading that. Of course, it's called A View from the Top: Living a Life of Significance. And you were so gracious to come back. I'd love to share that book with the Scaling Up Nation.
Yeah, man, that would be great. You know what's funny about that book? People ask me oftentimes about what inspired the book. And I said, well, the truth is I didn't want to write the book. And they said, what do you mean you didn't want to write the book? You wrote a book. And I said, yeah, but in the mastermind group I was in with Dave Ramsey and Dan Miller and Ken Abraham and Jeff Mosley and Ron Doyle, some of those amazing guys that live here in Nashville, I had a pretty colorful story to tell. And one of the guys just mentioned you should write a book. And I went, oh, man, that would be too hard. Who would read my book anyway? I got Ken Abraham in the room that had written over 100 books. Dave Ramsey sitting at the head of the table has written probably 24 books. Dan Miller across the table has written probably 18 books. And I'm like, who would read my book? And they said, Ken Davis chimed in and he said, nobody can tell your story but you. And if it could change one life, would it not be worth it? And it so inspired me, Trace. When he said that, I was thinking, yeah, man, yeah, I can hold on to that. So I spent the next 18 months working hand in hand with Morgan James, my publisher, and we worked diligently to craft the book. So get a lot of response, get a lot of feedback on it. I do think it's helped some people over the course of the years that it's been in print. And it's kind of a memoir. It tells my story, but there's some challenges in there as well. And yeah, it was really fun. It was fun to do the book.
What would you say the biggest hurdle you had to get over in order to write the book was?
Oh, it was all in my head. It was like, who would want to read my book, right? I mean, who am I? I'm going to write a book. Nobody cares. But the truth is we're all unique, and God has gifted all of us with a story. And so I just thought through what the story that I had and how I could impact other lives. And the real premise of the book is how to live not only a successful life, but a significant life. And the automobile accident that I had in 2001 was one of the catalysts that had me create the book. Once I started thinking about the life lessons that I learned as a result of that. And what I learned was that I'd had great success financially as a young entrepreneur, but I had no significance in my life. And so I wanted to really impress upon people that it's not all just about your level of success financially or your success in whatever category you deem that to be, but it's about the significance. And the significance piece is always about others. And so I really started focusing what are some of the stories that I could tell that would be impactful, helpful, so that other young, small business owners or decision makers wouldn't have to make on their own. They could hopefully learn from some of my mistakes. And so I put some successes in the book, but I also put some real challenges in the book, some real hurdles that I'd had over the course of my life, hopefully to allow others to dodge some of those landmines that we go through as we live life.
Big A, you're huge on serving others. And in the book, you address that. But I want to ask you, how can individuals balance their personal ambition with serving others effectively?
Yeah, I think it's got to be very intentional, Trace. In the first 20 years of my career, I did solo. I didn't have trusted advisors around me. It's not until the past 25 years that I've been involved in mastermind groups and having board of advisors, trustees around me that are unbiased that could really pour into my life. And what I found was I was extremely selfish. It was all about making a little bit more money, opening another store, getting a second home, bigger cars, fancier boats. And there's nothing wrong with all those things. I don't want to make it sound bad that if you have any of that, because I enjoy nice things even today. But what I wasn't doing was allocating any time, specifically, intentionally trying to help others. I was doing nothing to reach out intentionally to help other people accomplish their goals and dreams. You know what's funny? When I reoriented my focus, I became more successful. And I think that's just the laws of nature is when you really focus outward because nobody wants to be around somebody that it's always about themselves, right? You've been in those conversations where no one ever asked you a question. They were just always telling you about themselves. And what I've learned at even dinner parties and being around other men is like probe deeper. I want to know more about them at the end of the conversation than they know about me. And they'll leave there invariably saying it was one of the best conversations they've had because I've given them a platform to share the things that they want to share with me. So it's like let their story be their story, right? Reach out to them, dig deeper, probe deeper, ask more questions, and it opens up a very lively discussion. And so that's the significance piece, focusing on others.
Big A, you and I met at a podcast conference. Our mutual friend Charlie Cicchetti introduced us. By the way, Nation, Charlie was on episode 415 recently. But when Charlie introduced you and I, you made me feel like I was the only person in that room. You are masterful at how you carry conversations.
Well, I appreciate that. You were the most important person at that moment, right? Is because that's our conversation. We may never get that opportunity again. We miss so many opportunities because we're distracted. We're focusing on things that are other than what's at hand currently. Even in dinner engagements or even in conversations at Podcast Movement or Podfest or wherever the case may be, it's like, I don't want to miss that opportunity. My mentor, Bob Warren, taught me that skill. And it's something that I didn't possess early on because I was so selfish. I was always thinking, how could I position this conversation to get out of it what I wanted? What could I do to let him know that I had it going on? Or what could I do to, get something in return for that conversation? And Bob Warren, my mentor for 20 years, taught me, he said, focus on that person, lock eyes with them, lean in, ask clarifying questions, probe deeper, and don't let anything peripheral come in the way. You focus on them. And even if somebody walks by, don't look to see who else is in the room, who came in the door. He said, you focus on them and you ask deep questions about their experience. And when you do that, they're going to know that you're interested in that conversation.
You mentioned masterminds earlier as being part of your success. How do they play a role in achieving personal and professional growth?
You know what's funny, Trace, is that when I was a young businessman, I started my first business when I was 18 years old, and just a year out of high school, I had to wait a few weeks in order to get my federal firearms license. You know what's funny is I had my federal firearms license at 19 years old, but I couldn't go buy a handgun. You had to be 21 at the time to buy a handgun, but I had a federal firearms license. But I opened, the pawn shop that we had there in Inglewood, Tennessee. And I thought I knew everything, right? I was 19 years old. I thought, hey, I got it figured out. I've got it dialed in. And the truth is I didn't know anything. And I made some horrific mistakes along the way. Had some businesses I started that failed. I started doing things that I thought was accurate, found out it was inaccurate later. It was just not good decisions. And until I allowed myself to subject myself to the scrutiny of other people, it's like, hey, it's okay if you don't know. It's okay not to have all the answers. It's okay to ask questions. And when you get into a group and you can just tell people, you can let that veil down and you can say, hey, I'm struggling in my marriage right now, or I'm having a challenge with my teenage son, or I'm struggling with cash flow. It endears you to other people. What we think is it repels them, but that's nothing further from the truth, because we all have issues in our life. And privately, we're at home talking with our spouse and we're trying to resolve it. And I always say, we don't know what we don't know until you get into an organization with a group of other people that can say, hey, have you considered looking at it from this perspective? Have you thought about this approach? Have you thought about wording it this way? And I was like, no, it never dawned on me. I only have one life experience. I only have one filter, and I only know to do it one way. And what I've learned is that there's so many other people that have tried and failed, or tried and succeeded, that it serves big dividends when you start getting the consensus of that multitude. You have 10 people that you meet with on a regular basis and you throw out an idea. Trace, you're probably like me. I get out of the shower, I got 3 new ideas. I'm like, hey, we're going to go do this and this. And I remember going to the Eagles group that I was associated with for a dozen years. And I would say, hey, I'm going to do this. And I remember one time Dave Ramsey looked at me. He goes, that's the stupidest idea I've ever heard. And I'm like, what? And Dan Miller goes, no, wait a minute, Dave. He said, if we do this with it and we introduce him to this person and we apply this resource, he may be onto something. And I'm like, I didn't even know that person. I didn't know there was another resource. I didn't know that there was another way to look at this. And then we formulated that idea and it worked. But see, if we'd gone at it with my approach, it would have failed miserably. But that's the reason that it helps you personally and professionally. Same way with Ron Doyle. Ron Doyle had been married about 10 years longer than I had at the time. And I came in one day all cocky and said, yeah, Robin said this and I'm going to do this. And Ron leaned back and scratched his chin. And he said, you do that and you're going to find your butt on the couch tonight. And I said, what? He goes, here's what you need to do. He said, Barbie and I get in these discussions. This is how I handle it. And I'm like, you really think that'll work? He goes, why don't you try? So I go home that night and I tried Ron's approach and it worked magically. And I'm like, I didn't even know to do that approach. So at that time, I really made a conscious decision that I would never do business or my personal life alone again, because isolation is the enemy of excellence. And if we want to excel in life, we have to get the consensus of the multitudes around us to look at what we're doing to help us to grow personally and professionally. There's no decisions that I make in isolation any longer. It's always with a group of people.
Intentionality was something you mentioned earlier. What are some of your daily habits and routines that can help others with making sure that they're paying attention to intentionality? And how would you define intentionality?
Yeah, that's a whole bunch of questions in one sentence. Let me think how I can break that down. So let's start out with daily habits. And so I'm a very habitual person. I have been my entire life, right? Some of my habits were bad, I had to break, and others were decent and have served me well. The thing that I do and have always done is I go to bed reasonably early so I can get up the next day and feel really good. And there's very, very little that will keep me up past the time that I'm ready to go to bed, because sleep is very important. It's vital to your function. It's important to me. I want to feel good the next day because I have a lot to do the next day and I always want to be at my best. So I go to bed early. I also get up early and I spend the first 15 to 30 minutes just quiet. I just sit there. I'm just meditate. I just pray. I'm a Christian by faith. And so I read God's word. I go through a very scripted out platform our entire church is going through right now. So there's daily reading each day, there's prayer time. So, probably the first hour of the day, every day is that. I have a hot tub outside under a enclosed structure. So rain, wind, sleet, hail, it doesn't matter. I love to get in the hot tub. So I'll spend another half hour in the hot tub, just kind of relaxing. Go to the gym after that and exercise for, 30, 45 minutes and come home, get a shower and go about my day. But it's very intentional, the things that I'm doing each day. And I learned years ago that this is not always the case. I wished I had mastered it, but I try to do only the things that I can do and I delegate everything else. Because the other things that will take energy from me will allow me to not be my best at the things that I'm best at. And so I'm fortunate to have a small team now that handles most of the daily operations. And so it allows me to do vision casting. It allows me to do interviews like this one I'm doing currently with you. I love interaction with the men in our organization. I love to just call randomly and check on them, see how they're doing. They always give me great feedback. And so those are the things. And it's really not important what I do compared to your question, but it's, are you intentional about what you're doing? Intentional for me just means I do it deliberately. I'm just very purposeful in the things that I do. If it's not on my calendar, it doesn't get done also. I mean, it's got to be written on my calendar in order for me to do it. There's a lot of wasted time in there if you don't do that. So be very specific, be very intentional, be very diligent, and accomplish the things that you need to do. If you only do 3 things a day and you really do them well over the course of a year, you've got thousands of things that you've completed. And so you don't have to do everything, but do a lot of things well and do them very intentional.
So many people think they do have to do everything, or that's just what they're used to doing, is saying yes and getting everything done. And to your comment, probably not those things well. What's something that people can do to lower those distractions and force intentionality?
Yeah, there's a lot of distractions out there today. And honestly, some of the things that I've really struggled with over the years is social media. A lot of distractions there. The phone can be a huge distraction. I've battled that probably the past 8 or 10 years because we have clients all over the world. So I can talk to somebody at any given moment, in some time zone. They're all over the world. And so I always have a battle with, well, if my phone is in my hand or my phone's in my pocket, I can touch base with Trace or John or Dick or any of those guys. And I'm like, that's a battle. So I have to be very structured when I use my phone. I can't have it right there when I'm trying to work on something intentionally. I need to turn it over, put it out of sight, put it on airplane mode. And at night, I'll be honest with you, Trace, because I'm a honest guy as far as being vulnerable. But it's been a battle between Robin and I, my wife and I. We've been married 45 years now. And I've battled with, she's like, hey, do you need to answer that text this late at night? Or do you need to do that email this late at night? And so I have a place in our mud room where you come in the rear of our house that I'll go and put my phone at a certain time in the evening, just so it's not a distraction between her and I. But that's not easy. I don't want to sit here and say I've got it all figured out, because I don't. It's a challenge. Even now, it's a challenge because I love to do what I'm doing. I love to work. I love to talk to you. I love to do these interviews. I love to interact with the guys. So oftentimes it doesn't feel like work. And that's a lot of excuses that I hear from guys. It's like, oh, it's not work. I just love to do it. Well, that's true. But if you're doing it with relationship capital from the people that you're supposed to be invested in at that appropriate time, then it is an expense. It is a detriment. And I did that for a long time. Like, there was a lot of relationship capital I burned up with Robin when I really should have been focused on her. I'll tell you a quick little story related to that. Is we had our 40th wedding anniversary 5 years ago, and took her to this really, really nice steakhouse here in Nashville. Jimmy Kelly's, one of my favorite restaurants, and it's the oldest steakhouse in Nashville. And I just love the atmosphere there. And so I had it all set up to bring flowers and to bring the cake and bring the whole dinner. And they came out and they were making a presentation. Well, I grabbed my phone and I was videoing it. And all of a sudden, I noticed Robin's face. Her facial features went down. I didn't think anything about it for a minute. And they continued to sing and give us a cake and, wish us, happy 40 years and all that kind of stuff. And they turned around, walked off, and I was all excited. I was all jazzed up, thought, well, I'd done a good job. And Robin goes, "You missed our moment." I said, "What?" She goes, "You were videoing our 40th wedding anniversary dinner. You missed our moment." And she goes, "Why were you videoing it?" I couldn't lie, Trace. I said, I thought it'd be cool to share. She said, "You were thinking about sharing our 40th wedding anniversary celebration party together in this amazing moment and you missed it." And I thought, "You're right, Robin. I did. I missed it." And I had to apologize. And I've had to be very conscious of those type things. And even now on vacations, it's very limited what I share because Robin's like, this is our time. These are things for us. And we don't have to capture everything on video. We don't have to capture everything. See, I'm a marketing mindset, right? It's always promotion and things like that. And Robin's like, this is our personal life and we don't need to share everything. So I'm just being vulnerable on this podcast to tell you that it's a challenge for me too. I have things I have to work on. And so we have to identify those and own it and then work on it. And that's what people like Robin, my wife, helps me do. Guys in our mastermind help me stay in line with the things that I need to focus on, right? And so I enlist accountability. I want people to hold me accountable. I want to be better. And you can only be better if you subject yourself to their scrutiny. 30 years now, every Monday morning at 6:30, I meet with 3 other guys and we have extreme accountability every Monday morning for 30 years. They ask me the difficult questions. They ask me the hard things. They know everything about me personally. And you say, why would you go through that? Because I want to be better. And I want to teach other guys how to be better. And I want to teach my grandchildren and my children how to be better. And I can't do that if I'm walking alone.
Hold on to your test kits, folks. We're going to take a quick break to hear from one of our sponsors. Your system deserves the best, and so do you. Thermal Fluid Technologies brings you Protocol heat transfer fluids. Formulated with their innovative no-pit inhibitors designed to keep your systems efficient and corrosion-free. Whether it's HVAC, food processing, or beverage applications, their glycol-based solutions deliver reliability where it matters most. Plus, with their comprehensive coolant testing program, you can rest assured knowing your system is always operating at its best. Discover the difference by going to scalinguph2o.com/TFT. Once again, that's scalinguph2o.com/TFT. Thermal Fluid Technologies, where performance meets peace of mind. And now, back to our interview. Big H, seems like everything is scheduled on the same day, and I know this has happened to everybody. We say yes to something, and then something else comes up, and we want to say yes to that. And now we've got 2 relationships. We're going to say yes to one and no to the other one. Is there a dichotomy that you go through to make sure you're choosing the right yes?
Yeah. Here's the thing. I don't have a formal exercise. I don't have an SOP written out to make that decision. But what helps me more than anything to keep the shiny objects at bay is to have a descriptive plan early in the year. I know what we want to accomplish. And if this will help me get there, then the answer is yes. If this won't help me get there, the answer is no. There's so many distractions. The most important word you could learn in the English language is no. I would love to, but I can't because that will distract me from my prior commitments. Here's what I've discovered. I used to think that that would offend people, but quite honestly, they respect it. And they wish that they could do that as well. And so if you're very concrete, you're very clear, you know the vision. I remember watching, and I've referenced Dave Ramsey a couple of times. Dave and I've been friends for 30 years, but I remember a board meeting he was having with 12 of his direct reports. And one of the guys raised his hand. Dave called on him. He said, yeah. And he said, I want to bring something up in this meeting. And Dave said, is it on the agenda? And he said, no. He said, we're not talking about it. And the guy said, well, this is important. Dave goes, it's not any more important than what we've already predetermined. And the guy said, okay, well, that's why Dave has been so successful, is because he has laser focus. And he will tell you no in a minute if it doesn't align with that vision. And so all I can say is it's uncomfortable and it can be disheartening to some people that you say no to, but it's probably the best thing that you can say for the observation of your vision and to accomplish what it is that you're trying to set out. I would have a lot more respect for people that tell me no than people that tell me yes and then half do whatever it is that they said that they could do. We don't have the bandwidth. I interviewed John Eldridge not too terribly long ago, and he said that we have so much on us. And those that don't know who John Eldridge is, he wrote Wild at Heart. And he said that our souls are not designed for the amount of information that we take each and every day. And he said back in biblical days when Jesus was walking the trail, he had 3 days to get to the next city. So he had time to process everything that he had learned in the previous city. He said, today we were inundated with information. We don't have the time to process it. It's the same way with people asking us to do something and we say yes before we clearly see if it's in alignment with our vision. It goes back to the first problem, though. If you haven't got a written vision, then you don't really have a roadmap. And it's a lot easier to overcommit. So I think we need to go back and say, what is your written vision and how does this align with it? And then the final thing that we use here is we have written core values. Relationships matter most, make it amazing, no excuses, everything's figure outable, and truth before opinion. And if it doesn't align with those core values, it's an immediate no. And so we use that filter as well as the vision. And it only takes moments to make a decision if we're going to accept or decline.
What advice do you have for someone that says, I've never thought about creating my own personal vision?
I don't know what I would do each and every day if I didn't have a vision of where we're going. And so hope is not a plan. You can't just get up and hope that this is going to work out. Here's what statistics have proven to be true. Most of the people, and I don't know statistically the number, but most people that have a written vision accomplish more than the written vision. And most people that don't have a written vision don't accomplish half of what they set out to do. And so it's just vital to keep that in front of you. And then when you do have a written vision, you can go back and reverse engineer that. And you know the tasks that you need to do each and every day in order to accomplish that goal. And so, because you asked me earlier how many interviews I've done, I've coached men, small business owners. I do a lot of one-on-one coaching. And I have guys that come to me and I teach them how to get on podcasts and things to do. And they'll call me and they'll say, hey, it's not really being that effective. And I said, well, what do you mean? I said, how many interviews have you done? They said 12. I said, 12. I've done 12 this week. And they're like, what? And I'm like, hey, you got to do this consistently, day in, day out, right? It's hard, but the dividends will pay off if you'll do it. And I feel that way about everything. There's no silver lining. There's no magic bullet. It's the consistency. It's a game plan. It's core values, a vision, a game plan, reverse engineer it, do the task every single day, and the goal will take care of itself. Don't focus on the goal. Focus on the task that you need to do today in order to accomplish the goal. The goal will take care of itself.
Big A, you are exceptional at saying very difficult things that people need to hear in a very caring way. Was that a skill you've always had, or did you develop that?
Well, I used to be a real ass, Trace, just to be honest with you. My wife has helped me with that as well. She said, you could say it differently. And I'm very forward, I'm very direct. And I've tried to temper that over the years to better have empathy and compassion and understanding, but still say it directly. Now, I don't know if it's something that I sat down and tried to master other than biting my tongue, not talking quite so much, listening a little more, and then saying what I need to say. I'll still say it directly. But the truth is, people are starving to death for authenticity. People are tired of the shiny, polished guys that are not being vulnerable. They're not being real. They're not being authentic. I had a conversation with a buddy of mine recently, and I said, you don't ever tell the bad stuff. All you tell is the good stuff. And nobody can relate with that. He's like, what do you mean? I said, none of us have it all figured out. And I think it would endear you to other people if you would occasionally share some things that didn't quite go as planned, because that's the reality of it. And I think young people have figured that out today, and they're pushing away from all the polish and the glitter and the shine. It's like, just be real with me. And so today, I do that. I think because I'm 64 now instead of 30, that I'm able to say it with a little more compassion, but still say it more direct. And I think people want it. Sometimes it kind of rattles them up a little bit. I used to do financial counseling at our church. And my wife would say, "Why do you have to make the women cry?" And I said, "Well, that's their choice. They cried because I told them to quit spending so much money." And she said, "That sounded sexist." And I'm like, "Okay, I can't say it that way. I'll say it to both of them going forward." And she said, "Okay, deal." And so she's helped temper me a little bit, but still I want to be authentic and I want to say it straight. I think you're wasting other people's time. I think it's a disservice to other people to not tell them the truth. I think it's as bad or worse than a lie. If you know better and don't tell them, I think you're cheating that person. And so I think you've just got to be direct, compassionate, show as much empathy as possible, but tell them the truth.
And you are so right with your statement. People are looking for that. They're craving that.
They are. Yeah. It's like, let's help each other. Let's get in the ditch with people and say, "Hey, man, I feel your pain. I've been there. I know exactly. Here's the things I did to overcome it." Rather than you got all the answers and you've never had a mistake. That's just not true. Nobody believes that. And so, yeah, I still think we can be direct. I'd rather people be direct with me than to beat around the bush and then go tell their buddy something that they should have told me. I'm like, your buddy can't fix it. But when you come to me, I can fix it. Like, let's mean you deal with it. I mean, be man enough to stand up and tell me the truth. That way I can deal with it. And I just think it's an honorable thing to do.
Big A, in your book, you talk a lot about gratitude. How can gratitude help us play a role in a more fulfilling life?
It was something that I wasn't real good at either the first 20 years of my career. And over the course of my life, going through many obstacles, and I talk about them in length in the book where, I had an automobile accident. I ran over and killed a pedestrian, and that really set me back. I talk about business deals in the book where people took advantage of me. And on a hunting trip, I was going to kill one of the guys out there that had really done me in. And that's a whole nother story within itself. And thankful to God that I didn't follow through with that bit of anger that I had at that time. And I just think that we've got to think through the things that we're trying to accomplish and do it in a meaningful, compassionate way. And the only way that I think that we can really do that is by being grateful. I was in a real slump a couple of years ago. It was bad. I'd really hit the wall. I'd worked way too much. I'd traveled too much. I spoke too much. I'd done way too much. And I really hit the wall. One of my colleagues said, "You should journal things you're grateful for." And I'm like, "I'm not grateful right now." And he said, "Yeah, you need to sit down and journal what you're grateful for." And 7 pages later, it allowed me to get out of the mindset that I was in. I had a legal pad and it was 7 pages of things that I was grateful for. Well, out of that, it birthed what we call Gratitude Day, where I take my 5 grandchildren and we go the day after Thanksgiving every year and we do random acts of kindness for people all over the community. And my grandkids said it's the most fun, enjoyable day of their life. And they say that year after year. And it's grown over the years. And we do some really amazing things and fun things. And now it's kind of started a movement. There's people all over the world now that are doing Gratitude Day with their grandchildren and with their children. And it helps you to get out of your own way and do things for other people. And they're not allowed to get anything. We don't do anything for, one of my granddaughters said, "Can we go buy me this?" I said, "No, it ain't about us today. It's about other people." And so they have learned to be generous as a result of that. But inside of me makes me very grateful that I'm allowed and able to do that. And I just think that if we take more time to write down the little things that we're grateful for, it puts us in a different frame of reference.
I love that. As a matter of fact, we stole a little bit of your gratitude day. We've been going to Waffle House the day after Thanksgiving and the day after, and actually Christmas Day for as long as I could remember. And we include a little part of that. Whoever's sitting behind us, we pay for their meal. We try to do it as non-announcing, notorious as we can. And our goal is to kind of get out without them knowing that we did it. And then, of course, they find out from the waitress. But that's something we do based on what you just said.
It's so fun. It's so fun. Trace, we started out that way in the early days, and that's graduated Just so you know, just so everyone will know that's listening, we've graduated up now. The waitress that's been taking care of us in Waffle House for the past 10 or 11 years, she knows when we come in what to do. And now we buy, if they're in the restaurant and they eat while we're there, we buy their meal. So for $400 or $500, Trace, you can buy the whole restaurant's meal for the whole time that you're there in Waffle House, and you do it anonymously. You don't do it so other people can notice and recognize, right? You do it anonymously, and the kids, it's one of their highlights of the year. It's like, man, that is so fun. And then to go out and buy gifts and presents and pay off people's layaways and check them out at the grocery and just do things all day long, for not a lot of money. And some people are like, they can't afford that. And I get that, but start small, right? Just do something small and work your way up. And it'll be amazing at how you'll want to do more even the following year. I'm just telling you, man, it's one of the greatest days of our year.
But yeah, I don't think I ever shared this story with you. We've done the Waffle House thing now for a couple of years where we pay for the person behind us. I've never been the recipient of that. And I wasn't looking to be the recipient of that.
Sure. Rarely will you ever
Well,
be.
I actually have a story where I was. It
Good.
was a very nondescript day. I think it was over the summer. I took my son to open up his first mutual fund. And after we left the financial advisor's office, we were eating at Waffle House. We have a lot of meals at Waffle House, it sounds like. Waffle House is great. So if you're not in the South, you might not know what we're talking about, but you're missing out. That's what I'm going to tell you. But anyway, we were talking about how stocks and bonds work and how mutual funds work. And he was trying to create a plan. And a gentleman came over as he finished his meal, and he handed my son Hayden a $50 bill. And he goes, I was just blown away listening to your conversation. And at the time, Hayden was 15. He asked how old he was. He goes, if we had more 15-year-olds that were having conversations like this, I just can't imagine where we would be. I want you to take this $50 and I want you to put it in that mutual fund. And I just thought that was fantastic.
That is so good. Today it's worth 150.
You're right.
Market keeps going up, right?
You are right.
He gave your son a gift that's going to keep giving. That's a great story. Thank you for sharing.
Well, Big A, I loved the book the first time. I loved it even more the second time. So anything else you want to tell the Scaling Up Nation about your book, where they can find it, why they need to read it?
One of my favorite stories in the book, it's called Breaking Free. And it's one of the chapters in the book. And we have to forgive people. And the bondage that I was in for a number of years by disallowing myself to forgive someone really set me free. It was a breaking free moment. And so I would just say, if you're a person that needs to forgive somebody, get the book and read the book. I tell a story in there where I forgave the guy on the side of the interstate. And it was the guy that I was going to shoot on a hunting trip. And he cheated me out of a lot of money in a business deal. And I set him free. And he said, I'm going to pay you the money back. I said, no, I didn't forgive you to get the money back. I forgave you to set myself free. Because when you're in that much bondage, it becomes a filter for everything you do. And it can make you a very disgruntled, disenchanted person. And life is too short to live with that bound up inside of us. And so, I think it's one of the most important stories in the book. So I would encourage you to get the book if you want to read the book and really concentrate on the forgiveness side, because we've all been done wrong. And people listening to this right now, Trace, are going, yeah, but you don't know what's been done to me. I don't. I don't know what's been done to you. But I do know that you can forgive people within your heart and set yourself free so that you're not in torment the remainder of your life. And so I would just encourage you to check that out. It's one of my favorite stories in the book.
So many people think forgiveness is a gift you give somebody else, but it's really a gift you give yourself.
100%. You set yourself free. My wife told me something that's really stuck with me, and we'll kind of end today with this, is she said, you have forgiven somebody when you quit demanding justice. And that's really stuck with me because there's so many people over the course of 46 years of being a small business owner that I think has done me wrong. And I hate to admit it, but I wanted bad for them. I didn't want good for them. And that's demanding justice. And when you have forgiven somebody, you quit demanding justice. It's just a freedom, Trace, that is bestowed upon us by us forgiving others. And there's horrific stories out there where people have abused people physically and mentally. And right, I hope I never have to go through that. And it's probably a lot easier on this side of the mic for me to tell people that. But I will tell you that there is a freedom that comes with forgiving and setting free than it does staying locked up in that bondage.
Such good advice. Big A, I've got a few more questions for you in the lightning round. So this is round 3 of the lightning round.
Let's do it. I love it.
All right. So if you're strapped in and ready, here is question number 1 of round 3. If you could create a holiday, what would it celebrate and how would people observe it?
Oh man, Gratitude Day. There you go. We've already talked about it. That would be the holiday. I've already given the SOPs how to do it. Go out and celebrate and do random acts of kindness for other people. Man, can you imagine? Think about this, Trace. If that was a holiday and the whole world was out celebrating Gratitude Day, trying to outgive each other, you think about the joy that that would bestow upon everyone. Gratitude Day is my number 1 answer.
Love it. Big A, what's the mantra you try to live by?
Yeah, it's can't, couldn't do it, and could did it all. It's the title of the first chapter of my book. And my mom taught me that when I was a kid. She said, if you think you can't, you won't. And if you think you can, you will. And so she would say, can't, couldn't do it, but could did it all. And there's nothing now that you can tell me that I won't at least attempt because I feel like I can do it. That's my mantra, man. I've lived my whole life under that premise.
What's the most adventurous thing you've done recently?
Recently, I don't know what you call recently, most adventurous thing I've done. I'm a pretty scheduled, regimented guy. I'm not real adventuresome.
You can take the recently out if you need to.
Yeah. We, this is kind of funny. We went and played golf years ago. There was this young man with us. His name was Brad. And there was a lot of pretty wealthy guys on this golf trip. There was 16 of us that had gone. And one of these young men, it was his son. He came. He was probably 16, 17 years old. And we got up to 17th hole, and down in the bottom, there were millions of golf balls. You could see them. It was in Florida. It was just swampy area. He goes, man, I wished I had a sack. I'd go down there and get a bunch of those golf balls. And all the guys went ahead and finished. And I said, Brad, I'll go down there with you. He goes, you would go down there? And I said, yeah, I'll go down there with you. So I took my shoes off, I rolled up my pants, and I waded out in there. Well, he got over in there a little ahead of me, and he started sinking, like literally started sinking. Like he was up to his knees, and I grabbed him, and he went up to his waist. And I was like, God, this is quicksand. He's going, I'm fixing to kill this 17-year-old kid out here in this swamp. I could buy as many golf balls as I want. And I'm down here with my pants rolled up out in the middle of a swamp. And so finally, I got a hold of his arms and he locked arms with me and I backed up a little. It took us probably 15 minutes to get out of that swamp. Lost all of his stuff that he had. It was crazy, but we still laugh about it even today. It's like I almost got killed over a golf ball and almost killed a 17-year-old. So that was pretty adventuresome for us.
Wow. Big A, you are a huge advocate of mastermind groups. What's one thing you wish everybody knew about mastermind groups?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that it endears yourself to be vulnerable and transparent with other men that are qualified and capable of helping you accomplish your dreams and goals. A lot of people don't want to tell anything outside of their personal, spouse or their closest best friend. But when you have 10 businessmen that are capable and qualified for giving sound, solid advice, the trajectory that it can set you on for success is exponentially greater than you doing it alone. And if we could ever convey to other businessmen that you need a safe place to share, you need to be able to hear the different perspectives, you need to be held accountable for your vision and the goals and the dreams that you've built for yourself and your family. And not only that, I think we have a responsibility to our families to do the very best we can. And I just don't think you can do that alone. So I would just say being in community, being in masterminds with the right people can put you on a trajectory of success like you never dreamed.
Well, Big A, I want to thank you for coming on for a third time to the Scaling Up H2O podcast. And I want to personally thank you for being such a great mentor to me.
Yeah, man, I appreciate that, Trace. Thank you. That means a lot to me. And I really, really appreciate your kind words. Thank you.
Thank you, Big A. And if you didn't catch on the other times that Big A was on the podcast, we call him Big A. His real name is Aaron Walker, but he is so much bigger than his name. So we call him Big A. Such an amazing person. He has helped me work on so many issues. And Big A does not have a problem telling you anything that is uncomfortable. He will just throw it right out there. He is one of those people that will tell you things that you need to know. And you're glad that he did, because a lot of people don't have the courage to say the things that he does. And I have been the recipient of many things that I probably did not want to hear from Big A, but they were all helpful. And because he pointed out a lot of times they were in my blind spots, I was able to put them in my line of vision and work on them. So Big A, thank you for doing that, not just for me, but everybody that you work with. And Big A is just that quintessential Southern gentleman. Don't you just love how very politely he told me that that was a whole bunch of questions in one sentence, big man? In that very Southern way. He just has this way of putting things. And, some of the quotes that he gave that I wrote down was, isolation is the enemy of excellence. You have forgiven somebody when you quit demanding justice. And then finally, something his mother told him all the time, couldn't do it, but could, did it all. Big A is always good for a fantastic quote. And it's my hope that this interview inspired you today. As I mentioned, Big A does have a book. It came out a couple years ago, and I read it on an airplane. Somehow it ended up in my backpack, and I didn't know it was there. So I reread it on an airplane, and I got so much more out of it the second time that I read it. I just wanted to have him on the podcast to share that with you. It's all about living a life of significance. And how do we balance the success that we strive for with significance? And how do we focus on others as we do that to make a positive impact? Now, I asked Big A if he had a standard operating procedure for how to create vision and purpose. And that's my thing. And Big A kind of laughed at me. You heard that in the interview. But I will say that Big A years ago was the one that introduced me to the book, The 12-Week Year. And there's your blueprint for that. That is how to figure out what you're about. That's how to figure out where you're going and how to craft a plan that you can change as your life happens. I just love the 12-week year. I talk about it all the time on podcasts like this one. So if you want to learn more about the 12-week year, we've got an affiliate link. You can go to scalinguph2o.com/12-week year. That's the number 12-week year. And there's your blueprint. Something else that Big A mentioned was Gratitude Day. And I just love that. I would love it if everybody that listens to this tells somebody about Gratitude Day. And wouldn't the day after Thanksgiving in 2025 just be fantastic if we all did that? It just allows you to be grateful for all of the things that you have, all the things that brings you joy and purpose that you're thankful about, all the resources that you have. Have gratitude for all of that. And Big A mentioned that he started a gratitude journal, and before he knew it, he wrote 7 pages. Well, I'm going to be honest with you, Scaling Up Nation. I don't journal that easily, and I really had to be coached to journal. And there's a gratitude journal out there called the 5-Minute Journal. And I don't even think it will take you 5 minutes to do it. Ask you 3 questions in the morning. This is the very first thing you do before you get out of bed in the morning. And then it asks you 2 questions. And it's the very last thing you do before you go to bed. And after you do that for a couple of days, a couple of weeks, it just changes your mindset. Your mind will look for things that you train it to look for. And if we are stuck in social media, if we are stuck in the news cycle, we are training our brains to look for so much negativeness out there. And I'm going to encourage you to use a tool like the 5-Minute Journal to try to get your brain retrained. I did this during COVID. It was the first time I started using the 5-minute journal, and it was a huge game changer. I still use it to this day. In fact, with all of my coaching clients, I encourage them to keep a gratitude journal by using the 5-minute journal. My wife does it. My son does it. It is such a fantastic tool. And if you want a 5-minute journal, you can go to scalinguph2o.com/5-minute journal. That's the number 5-minute journal. And we'll also have some information on our show notes for you on that. And I did mention Big A's book. So if you go to our show notes page, we're going to have a link for you there. You don't ever have to worry about writing down all the things that I mention on this podcast because I know you are most likely driving. I want you to stay safe, but you can definitely go to our show notes page and you can have an affiliate link there that links directly to our link to Big A's book. And I am sure that you will enjoy that. By the way, if you are now as much a Big A fan as I am, you might want to go back and listen to him on episode 184. That's where we introduced Big A to the Scaling Up Nation and talked about his journey throughout his life. And then on episode 248, we heard all about Big A's insights when he took a 2-month sabbatical. So you'll hear all of that and more on those episodes. And Big A, once again, thank you for coming again on the Scaling Up H2O podcast. I hope you are thinking, what is the purpose of your life? How are you creating significance? And what do you have to be grateful for? And how do you shift to a mindset of gratitude? Well, Nation, next week we're going to have a brand new episode for you. Until then, I hope you take all the advice of Big A, you put it into play, and we'll be back next Friday with that brand new episode. Have a great week, folks. Accelerate your success. Why go it alone when you can get further faster and have more fun doing it? The Rising Tide Mastermind offers a dynamic environment where you can grow professionally and personally while enjoying the journey. To find out more about the Rising Tide Mastermind, go to scalinguph2o.com/mastermind. Once again, that's scalinguph2o.com/mastermind. Find out if the Rising Tide Mastermind is right for you.